Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and the bin that I need to feed today is the one that you see over here on the bottom. It's been 15 days since we last fed that system. And then the following day after we fed it, we came back in here 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago, to add some worms because that system's cocoon nursery, unlike what you see here, the ones where the bin is on top of the other bin, these are just the old systems that the worms used to live in, and their castings plus the cocoons they left behind, giving that stuff a little bit of extra time so that the cocoons can hatch and get rounded up too. But the reason we can't keep the cocoon nursery of that system down there is because it's just way bigger than the other ones. It's in this grow bag, well, double bag grow bag, and these are actually the worms and compost that came out of my compost barrel, which we harvested months ago at this point. I don't know, I guess just to throw some round figures around, I would say it was about 6 months ago that the compost barrel was emptied, and we took all the stuff that we thought was like practically finished castings, and it took me 3 trips down here into my wormery, carrying 3 bags like this full of this stuff down into here to keep it from freezing, with the assumption that it was going to be crawling with worms, and to, give the material a chance to dry out a little bit, because it was that's the reason I had to put it into 3 separate bags to bring it down here, because it was very damp and very heavy. So even now that the material's been had its worms removed, had a lot of large chunk materials removed, has dried a lot since then, still has a good amount of weight to it when I pick it up off the ground and carry it over here. So those 14 days ago, when we added worms to the other system, it was a similar bait box to what you see here. This has just been reloaded since. So the last time we came in here to pull worms out, we did find that they had really gone through the contents of this box to the point where you couldn't even make out shredded paper anymore. They had just completely eaten all of it. And I feel like I'm just doing something wrong here. If if there was that potential for them to really come in here and all gather around this stuff and eat it all up, like I saw happen already here once before, then what did I do wrong? So I did actually go back to the previous time that did result in great success to see exactly what my magic recipe was, and I did notice that a couple things I had put in at that time were things that I forgot to put in last time, stuff like my worm chow and stuff like some yummy cucumber peels. So I had this kind of sneaky suspicion that we were going to come in here and not find the type of turnout that we had seen before. So, since this thing is still loaded with tons of shredded paper, probably even some of the leftover lettuce that we salvaged from the last go around. Well, maybe not. I think at the very bottom, which is where I threw those chunks of lettuce, I don't feel anything. Well, 2 weeks later, wouldn't be surprised if they ate that stuff up. But the real, I think the real evidence of the worms coming in here was all of the cardboard just being gone, all the paper, last time I came in here. So it was like an immediate telltale that something was really going on here. And I think the one way that we can, oh, geez, so clumsy. Sorry. I think the one way we can try to get things back on track with this baiting is to up the ante again, throw some stuff into here that we know has worked in the past, some worm chow, and luckily I just came up with a nice new recipe and a whole bunch of it. So I got plenty of worm chow. And I do have cucumber upstairs too, so since cucumber had once worked really well getting the worms to come into this box, I think I'm going to shoot upstairs and get some more cucumber with which to reload. And we're not going to do an emptying of the bait box today, because it just doesn't seem to me like there's enough of a turnout in here to justify it. It does seem like there's just a whole bunch of food in here that they can still nibble on, and I really wish they would go for it, And I think the other thing we could do with that too is dampen it all down quite nicely. We'll spray a little bit of water into there too, so if moisture is what they crave, perhaps not so much fresh bedding or cucumber or whatever else, but maybe if it's just a simple thing that they like moisture, then we'll make sure that the bait box is adequately dampened too, to make that a nice additional thing to try to lure the worms over with. Yeah, really nice castings. It's always nice to keep breaking this stuff up further and further into finer and finer material. So yeah, I think it's break time because I got to shoot upstairs to the fridge, grab a few bites to throw in here for these little guys to get this bait box going again. And I might as well grab stuff that we're going to feed the other bin with too, so I'll be right back. A good bit of the stuff that I got for them was kind of big in size. There was a whole tomato, there was a whole cucumber, so I took it upon myself to try to fashion some slightly smaller bits that would fit nicely in here. This is way too much. We're not going to need all this, but we can definitely use some of it. Let's bring this thing back down. And right smack in the middle, we're going to put in all these tempting morsels. So if any worms want a piece of it, they're going to have to head right down into our little baiting station. Look at this piece. Yeah, I had this big piece in mind. Last time I think it was just a few peels or something. This time we're really giving them big chunks of juicy stuff. And you know, I really would like to see a good turnout here. So each time I repeat that, does it mean I need to add another chunk of food? It also seems like some of these pieces of paper might be a good idea to, maybe we can cover up and even almost cover up the whole thing. No, you know, I don't like the idea of covering it all up with castings for some reason. But we could prevent castings from pouring into the hole as we backfill by putting the little covering on here. I don't think we need to put a whole lot more in here. We'll throw the rest into the adult bin where the adult worms live. And we'll hope that this baiting attempt continues with better success going forward. This didn't seem too much of a... Oh, you know what? Almost forgot. If I didn't forget something, it wouldn't be me, right? The other thing that we thought was also another good attractant was the worm chow. This worm chow is perhaps not quite as fine as the stuff I'd been using previously. My first batch was made out of mainly grains and seeds, but these latest couple batches I've been making included nuts. And now I also, in the most recent batch, included beans. So I keep finding different things that are, you know, old things from the cupboard, stuff that I'm thinking might, you know, work well in a worm chow. So I think that's it for today. No hole out, so we can go straight to feeding the system with the adult worms in it. So let's go get them. I almost forgot. I'm going to dampen it too. Take care of that before we take care of the feeding. I would imagine that after 15 days, the system's probably ready for a feeding. Yeah, like I said, the last check-in on this system included nothing more than the addition of worms. A whole lot of worms from the system that we just checked in on. And at that point, the baiting box had worked quite nicely, but on this go-around, it didn't seem like the baiting box was doing a whole lot. Interesting. So many of my systems, I see no signs of any of these flying insects anymore, but here we still see them. So it's a good reminder to me that I need to go grab my Mosquito Dunks BTI solution in my spray bottle. My assumption has to be that all these little flying insects are making use of this top surface of the material, and that if I'm going to combat them, then this is the place to do so. And do so before I begin mixing all the material in, combining it with the rest of the bin's contents. So I'm starting to find that this is working pretty good. Most of my systems, I've really seen no signs of any flying insects anymore. Here I was a little surprised actually, which was kind of a cool feeling to be surprised at the flying insects when they had become so commonplace. So I don't think we need to put too much more. I think that's a pretty good amount. Now, you know, you look at the stuff that we're going to be dumping in here. Cucumber, tomatoes, a lot of moisture going in. And Some little bedding bonus here we'll throw in too. Not to mention the fact that the material just visually looks kind of maybe more damp than it needs to be. I'm starting to wonder if that plastic covering that was on here might be due for replacement. Put something on here that allows for a little bit more airflow and drying rather than locking all this moisture in as well as it does. And it does great, you know. Keeps things very nice and damp down here for the worms, just the way they like it. And I guess one thing we could do is just really quick give the whole system a little bit of a stir. It's been more than 2 weeks since they got fed, so unless they were fed some sort of really slow composting foods, we might not see many leftovers of whatever it is they got last time. I kind of like breaking stuff up, trying to create little air pockets, little gaps in between the chunks of material. It also kind of lets me sort of screen through everything to make sure there's nothing that's, you know, holding together as a really large chunk. Anything that appears to be that way, I just also at the same time try to crumble it into smaller bits. So let's see, all these bits of newspaper we found here on the top. I don't know, I think they're just going to get included with the feeding as bedding, because they don't really look much like top covering pieces of paper anymore. And I don't know, was one of these a coffee filter that we could mark our feeding area with? Because I did not bring down coffee to feed with, but as long as we've got an old one we could use for that, then that's cool. I don't think we're doing any fancy sort of pattern to the feedings or anything in this system. It's just very traditional from the perspective of you get to it when you get to it, and they get what they get. They get fed in the same place every time. Nothing interesting going on from that perspective either. I guess the only real novelty about these worms was their origin, which was my compost barrel. Let's see, I do have some facts and figures, because besides the couple, you know, original rounds of hauling worms out of the compost to populate this bin originally, and then more recently hauling babies out of the nursery, and then there'll be more coming soon. We've got an estimated population in this bin. This is all based on averaging everyone's feedback in the comments of how many worms they thought we have here. I think, what is it? Yeah, there it is. I wrote it down. I got my little notes off on the side. 1,190 worms populating this system. And I thought we might be adding more worms today, but I wasn't really, you know, getting too vested in the idea in case it wasn't going to happen. I had this feeling about the way I had left that baiting station, and it just somehow didn't seem, I don't know, like it would perform as well as the previous one had. And then when I went back to see how I had set up the one that had worked so well, and I saw how I had used worm chow and I used cucumber, and it was, you know, nice and damp, I knew I had to fix things if I wanted anything to happen. But I got a feeling next time we go in there, maybe we'll wait another couple weeks, we should hopefully start getting a good turnout. And, you know, over that time too, the castings around the bait box are going to just gradually continue to slowly dry, which will also probably result in the worms in the material getting interested in seeking out a more damp and comfortable place to be. Okay, it does seem like here and there as I reach down to the very bottom I'm still encountering sections that I've not yet tilled up, but this was a pretty invasive stirring of the system's contents, and I don't think the worms are too bothered by it. They don't seem to be. Hopefully it don't trigger some sort of a crazy exodus. I have once or twice seen that happen, but it wasn't with these types of worms. It was with I think it was with the more tropical type worms I've seen that happen. I think it happened with night crawlers once, African night crawlers, and I think it was with that blue worm mix too, with the Uncle Jim's mix too. I think I've seen that sort of escaping mentality. Although, no, I think once long ago it might have been with my Euros, or maybe with one of my red wiggler bins. And I do also remember another time where I just had sort of a mass exodus out of a system. And oddly enough, in that case, the worm simply came up the edge of the, they just crawled up the edge of the wall, over into the neighboring bin and right down into the neighboring bin. And it was like they did it in a single file, because it was just, you know, a complete move of the worms. And I didn't think they were capable of doing something like that, but I witnessed it and it was pretty amazing. Wow, this is a fun bin. Look at all these worms. I can't seem to resist plowing through and wanting to look at them. 116 days, you know? This is a bin where in the past I would have been reluctant to put a whole bunch of fresh bedding in, with the anticipation of the system being one that I would probably want to be harvesting soon, but I've been striving to extend the overall time frame of my bins as far as their lifespan start to finish. But it is a little bit difficult because I've also at the same time been trying to go very generous on bedding, so I do seem to feel like I'm reaching capacity in systems that I'm trying to push to a new standard for old age. But I can't resist. I think we're going to put a little bit of fresh bedding down here for these little guys. For that, we're going to bring in my pre-made bedding mix. It's just shredded paper and cardboard and leaves all mixed together. A little bit of castings thrown in too to just give the stuff a little bit of life. I think before we put the kitchen scraps in, why don't we drop in the worm chow? I've just got this funny feeling that worm chow plus shredded paper and cardboard is sort of like the perfect combo. As long as the chow doesn't end up in a big pile and end up being just a big mound of junk mounded up on itself, as long as it's kind of mixed in with the neighboring materials, it seems like it's got a good chance at being consumed pretty quickly by the wormies. So here, something kind of big looking, but it's just lettuce leaves. I don't think it's stuff that's going to last all that long. You know, kind of a lightweight feeding right there if that's all they were to get, but that's not all they're getting because you saw what else they're getting. There's the rest of that piece of cucumber and that other half of the tomato. And that now I think looks like a pretty nice generous feeding, right? And they deserve it, right? They're going to enjoy this, I think. Whether it's going to last another 15 days till we feed them again, I don't know. Maybe not. It might not be a bad idea to come in here sooner to pay them another visit, make sure they're well fed, and, you know, I can't seem to resist. I do feel like there's ample time for this sort of material to eventually get broken down by the wormies. So let's go really generous like we've been doing lately. Oh yeah, one more thing. A little bit of pulverized eggshell. A little bit of grit to go along with their meal. What do you think? Looks pretty good to me. Oh geez. Once again, stuff I forgot to use, but pretty opportune that I forgot, because now at the end I could actually use it to get as many of these castings back into the bin rather than having them rinsed off in the sink. This is after all where they belong, right? And a little bonus bedding. And then I get to get my gloves dirty again. But it's worth it because it's fun. Oh, look at all this leftover food we bumped into earlier. And leftover bedding bits. We want to get all this down here in the feeding zone too. There's banana stems. I forgot all about that good stuff. Nice aged bedding. Stuff that's been in the bin for quite some time now. If we're doing away with the plastic covering though, I'm trying to think of what I've got that would work well here. I'm almost tempted to just grab a single sheet of newspaper and drape it out across the top and leave it at that. And if it goes edge to edge, it would actually provide a pretty good barrier to prevent evaporation. So the material underneath it wouldn't dry out terribly. It would get a little bit dry, but it would probably provide enough protection to let the material stay semi-damp and still get utilized by the worms still, versus it going just completely dry and then the worms treating this as like a barren no man's land. If there is advantages to keeping things damp, you know, maybe I'm talking myself back into keeping the plastic covering. Should I? Shouldn't I? I feel like I should put paper on and see how that feels. If we feel like we still need the plastic, then we'll use it. Let's take that approach. Hold on. So I had this fast food bag here, and I started unfolding it, and I thought to myself, well, maybe it'll be big enough to fit. Well, it looks like it's probably big enough to cover this bin about 3 times over if I had to. So I'll probably just cut off maybe a small section of it. That'll be plenty. Looks like a perfect fit. Before we put it in, let's just, I guess for good measure, give this top coating a little shot of this stuff as well. My hope is that the next time we check in here, we don't see any more flying insects. It does seem like that's been the common theme in all my systems, even the ones where I'd seen quite a lot of them. It's kind of nice to return to a system where you knew it had been a problem before and come back to find that it no longer is a problem, so I hope that'll be the same thing here. So, well, you can see I already took the time to get cleaned up when I was making this nice fancy bag covering here. But that's the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. There's also channel memberships if you want to be a contributing member. That would be awesome too. Just hit the join button. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.